Welcome back, everybody, to the Tennessee Titans franchise here on Madden 23. The postseason, at least for us, is now done here in season number 2. We ended up losing in heartbreaking fashion in the divisional round, 30-28 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was a really wild game with a lot of roller coaster emotions. We started off playing terribly. We were down 21-0. Then we stormed back and took the lead. Pittsburgh was back ahead late, and of course, Garrett Pace overthrew a wide-open Mecole Hardman touchdown on 4th down with like 10 seconds to go to ultimately lose us the game and thus eliminate us from the playoffs. So today we'll be recapping the season. We'll be going over our little off-season preview, and we're also going to be talking about all of the underclassmen who have recently entered the NFL draft. Keep in mind, we have 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders. We've got a lot of draft capital this year. These underclassmen who have recently entered the draft were revealed yesterday in the NCAA Next Up series, so in case you missed that offseason episode, make sure you check out that series playlist as well. You may notice some players are in a new order from when we last went over them. For example, quarterback Kane Sanders is now projected as a possible top 10 pick. When we originally did his prospect profile, he was looked at as a day 3 guy, but with how good of a season he's had, his stock has gone up. We're not going to talk about players who have gone up and down. We're going to save that for the draft preview. We're more so just focused on the new underclassmen who have recently entered. There's only one quarterback who declared early, and it's Texas A&M's Luca Franco, who quietly had a really good season this year for the Aggies. Texas A&M has not been a team who has been looked at as a serious contender because their defense has been a total train wreck. But on the offensive side of the ball, they were quite good this year, led by their junior quarterback, Luca Franco, who's a really well-rounded player. Solid athleticism, pretty strong arm. The accuracy has shown good signs of improvement over his 3-year career with Texas A&M. And I think he could be a good sleeper probably towards, I would say the middle of the 4th round. I think that's realistically where he's going to end up. Probably an early day 3 pick, maybe sneaking into late day 2. I think he's a lot better of a prospect than people realize. We've got 2 running backs here, Aaron Robinson out of Penn State and Ryan Faison out of LSU. Faison is projected as an undrafted free agent. I do like his upside a lot. I think some team might take a shot on him late, but he didn't get enough touches to really warrant being considered as a high draft pick. Aaron Robinson, on the other hand, does have a lot of experience over the past 3 seasons with Penn State. Robinson gives you everything you look for in a prototypical power back. 6'3", 230 pounds, big physical runner, the type of guy who can put his head down in space and just maul dudes. He has impressive explosiveness for his size, which I really think gives him a lot of upside, and I think the ceiling with Robinson is quite high for only being viewed as a day 3 prospect. I think he's probably going to go in a similar range to Luca Franco, probably in the 4th round. He would go higher, but this running back class is so stacked. Let's now talk about the wide receiver position, where things get really interesting with 10 players who have declared for the draft early. Shea Jones-Porter, the best of that group, he'll likely be a first-round pick. You've got possible day 2 guys with Rashid Salid and Quinn Crew. Going down the board, there are some good day 3 options with Hot Rod Pryor, Julian A. Butius, and Miami Thomas. And then some interesting names amongst the undrafted crew with Elijah McKay, Travis Bell, Benjamin Cannon, and Matt Montgomery. Let's go back up to the top with Shea Jones-Porter out of Penn State. He's going to be somewhere between the 1st and 4th receiver off the board. Currently, he's the 4th projected one as of now, but I could see any of the top 4 receivers going in any order. Shea Jones-Porter is a total weapon. This is a guy who is a playmaker with the ball in his hands, a yards after catch monster. He knows how to get open, and he's pretty athletic. He doesn't necessarily have game-breaking speed, but he has impressive explosiveness and quickness. For somebody at 6'2", 200 pounds, the production has certainly been there at Penn State with 34 touchdowns in 3 seasons. He is just an aesthetically pleasing wide receiver to watch. He knows how to get open. He knows how to make plays with the ball in his hands. Rashid Salid and Quinn Crew are both pretty similar players, and I like both of them a lot as likely fringe top 100 picks. We'll start with Salid out of Virginia Tech. 6'2", around 195 pounds. Put him out in space, and he can absolutely fly. Another guy who's got really impressive explosiveness and quickness with the ball in his hands. He is a true deep threat, somebody who can stretch the field vertically and really gave the Virginia Tech offense a new level of explosiveness this year with 1,250 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. He needs to be more consistent in the short to intermediate game in terms of his routes and getting open, but I think Rashid Shaheed can be an absolute playmaker for an NFL offense. I think Quinn Crew could be one of the biggest hidden gems in this year's class. Currently projected as a fringe top 100 pick, but I think when it's all said and done, there are going to be a lot of teams who regret passing on him. Another guy with really good size and speed. He might be the fastest wide receiver in this draft at 6'1", 200 pounds. He doesn't necessarily have the quickness and explosiveness that Rashid Shaheed has, but I think he's a little bit more polished in terms of getting open across all areas of the field. 22 touchdowns in his 2 seasons at Texas A&M. So this is a guy who, when he gets the ball, knows how to make plays. He knows how to get open. And I think he's going to be a really, really good pro when it's all said and done. Let's take a look at some of the day 3 guys now with Hot Rod Pryor out of USC, Julian A. Butius from Cal, and Miami Thomas out of, ironically, Miami. Of that group, I'm most intrigued by Hot Rod Pryor. The word I would use to describe his game is playmaker. This is a very explosive football player, a blue-chip recruit who struggled early at USC, but he has really grown through his 3 seasons with the Trojans. His production has gone up in a very linear way in the sense that it has been very consistent, which is a good thing. Now, on the field, he's not the most consistent. That's why he's projected to be probably a 5th-round pick. He doesn't have the best hands, a little inconsistent as a route runner, but we've seen the flashes over the 3 years at USC. This is a kid with a lot of upside who's got a chance to be special if he can hit his ceiling. He's the youngest player in the entire draft at only 20 years old, so I think with the right development, he certainly could. And then as we look at these undrafted guys, I think some of these players could be pretty good. Travis Bell Jr. had very impressive production last year considering poor quarterback play at LSU. And then I think somebody's going to draft Benjamin Cannon, only 21 years old, great route runner, big guy, pretty fast. I think all 4 of those players are quite talented. As we move on to tight end, there are 2 new additions to the class with Gunnar Wilson out of Akron and Dax Boss out of Texas. I do like Dax Boss quite a bit, but I really want to focus on Gunnar Wilson because I think there's some impressive upside with him. 6'6", 260 pounds. The guy's a complete freak athlete, and I think if you look at the ceiling, he's got arguably the highest ceiling of any tight end in this class, which is impressive because there's a shot that we see 3 tight ends go in the 1st round. He reminds me a lot of George Kittle in terms of his build and his athleticism, probably a little bit bigger than Kittle if we're being honest. He originally went to Penn State, then transferred to Akron, had a great redshirt sophomore season leading to him declaring at the draft. I think he's probably going to end up in the 2nd round and could be a star if developed. On the offensive line, we've got a few players who declared. Robert Williams out of Nebraska, Bubu Kuyatse out of Ole Miss, Logan Capley from Alabama, and Alex Sarkisian from Georgia. The name who really pops out with this group is definitely Logan Capley out of Alabama, who's being projected as a possible top 10 pick. Of all the underclassmen to declare for the draft, he is the highest projected one amongst the group. This is a large, physical human being. Reminds me so much of Evan Neal coming out of Alabama. A guy who can play numerous positions on the offensive line, but has mainly played right tackle. 6'7", 323 pounds. Very good production this year. 43 pancakes to just 4 sacks. Not a lot of pressures, not a lot of hurries. This is a guy who has really impressive athleticism for his size. Super long arms, super big, physical kid. I think he very well could be the top offensive lineman off the board, even higher than some of these other guys like Kalen Thonts and Omar Irons. As we move on the defensive line, we've got Javari Baker out of USC as a possible 1st-round pick. And some of the other defensive ends include Michael Winters, Justin Outlaw, Benjamin Trevino, he's 6'10", Teddy Morgan, and then Torian Mason at right end. We'll go back up to the top here with Javari Baker, who's being looked at likely as a possible top 15 pick and someone who could challenge to be the top defensive lineman off the board. This is another player who's a very high recruit, joining USC, and he also struggled a little bit early, like his teammate Hot Rod Pryor. I think we've really started to see the flashes with Baker closer towards the end of the season this year, leading him to declare, and some teams really being high on him. 6'5", 280 pounds, very athletic, really solid in the run game, and has shown very good improvement as a pass rusher. He's a little bit of a risk. He's only played well, really, for about half a season, but I think the upside is definitely there. And then as we go to Torian Mason from Ohio State, he's projected as a likely day 2 pick. He's kind of a weird player because he's got more speed than quickness or twitch, which isn't really the case with most of the defensive linemen in this year's class. I do think he is very refined in terms of his pass rush moves. He can win with power. He can win with finesse. I think that gives him a high floor. I think his lack of explosiveness, however, limits his ceiling, but I do think he'll end up being a pretty good player. Let's move over to the big fellas inside at defensive tackle. The top projected underclassman is K.L. Hamp out of Michigan. And along with him, we've got Stroloff Steinklesen and Feletti Lamatoa. Of this group, I really want to go over K.L. Hamp because he's a really physical run defender. This is a guy who doesn't always make plays in the box score, but his presence is absolutely felt as a guy who needs to be double-teamed, particularly on first and second down, to try to open up some rushing gaps within the middle of the offensive line. K.L. Hamp is a game wrecker, even if the numbers don't really show it. Now, he's only started for 1 year, so the question with him is, can the production be sustainable going into the NFL? And because of that, he is being looked at as a fringe top 100 pick, along with his lack of pass rushing upside as well. Moving on to linebacker, I really like Arthur Balthazar out of Notre Dame. Along with him, we've got Robert Prince out of Arkansas, projected to be undrafted. Vilhelmsen out of Minnesota, projected day 3 guy, and then Spencer Gotham, who we'll get back to in a minute. Let's look at Balthazar real quick, a projected fringe first rounder. He's kind of a weird player because he doesn't really have a set role, in my opinion, entering the league. He's not really an edge rusher. He's not really a true off-ball guy, but he can really do all that. I kind of want to see him being used like how the Colts use Shaq Leonard. Not necessarily as a full-on traditional off-ball linebacker, you know, somebody who makes plays in the backfield, but also somebody you trust to go out and make plays in coverage. This is a guy who really produces in the run game, really makes plays in coverage. He's really improved, particularly in zone coverage throughout this season, and I think he very well could be a first-round pick. As we move over to Spencer Gotham, this is a guy who's sort of like a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. Highly productive, really good at everything, really sure and steady tackler, but he's a little bit of a tweener. 6'2", 232 pounds. Not necessarily the guy you want on the edge because he's not going to be able to handle physical offensive linemen. So I think he's going to have to transition to more of an off-ball role, and I think Oregon has realized that, using him more as an off-ball guy the past couple of seasons compared to his freshman year where he was used more as an edge rusher. I think we've really seen his athleticism increase with him losing some weight, which has led to scouts really liking his upside as an off-ball linebacker in the future. Moving on over to the secondary, we have 5 new corners. Donovan Bambo out of Florida, Adam Kroger from Alabama, Dante Williams out of the University of Georgia, and then some undrafted guys here with Corian Humphrey from Texas and Zaire Joe-Olholm out of Clemson. 2 guys who are pretty raw, but do have intriguing upside as priority free agents. Let's go back at the top here with Donovan Bambo, who's being looked at as a possible first-round pick. This is a guy whose stock has really gone on the rise. He performed at a very high level through Florida's 3 college football playoff games, most notably against Ohio State, where he got a big interception in the second quarter. Bambo stands at 6 foot, around 180 pounds. He's not necessarily a freak athlete, but I would say he is a plus athlete, and his stock should be able to continue to rise during the scouting combine. This is a guy who's got good ball skills, not just the interception in the Ohio State game, but really throughout the entire season. He's good in man coverage. He's good in zone coverage. There really aren't any weaknesses to his game, and I think with how much he's on the rise, he very well could be even higher than the 4th corner off the board. Adam Kroger, I think, could be a really good day 2 guy. 6'2", 220 pounds. Big, physical player. This is the type of guy who teams are going to want on the outside with big, physical receivers like Mike Evans, Mike Williams, Michael Pittman. I'm not just trying to pick on guys named Mike. Those were the first 3 players who came into my head. Kroger doesn't really possess elite athleticism or ball skills, but I think you really trust him on some of those bigger receivers, a guy who can make plays in jump ball situations. As we go over to safety, there are some solid 3 safeties with Tomase Tonumampeya out of Nebraska, possible 3rd to 4th round pick. Ramiro Marsh out of USC, I think is really talented, but has had trouble staying on the field with injuries. And then Peaceable Twise out of Boise State. At strong safety is where things get really interesting with Ace Legerdur, Grant Hogsflesh, and Ronnie Dayton Quinn. I want to look at all 3 of these players because I really like them. Starting with Legerdur, there's a shot he could be the top strong safety off the board and maybe a first-round pick. This kid's really athletic. Very, very impressive for his size, the way he can move. This is somebody who's going to be versatile. You can put him as your center fielder, as more of your free safety. You can put him as your strong safety. You can have him in sub packages as a linebacker. He's 6'1". He runs a 4.3. He's super twitchy. Now, the production this year as a junior really wasn't great, and I think that's the concern with some scouts. However, his stock is still impressive enough to where he's probably still going to be a top 40 pick based on his athletic traits, measurables, and upside, being a guy who could be one of the best safeties in the league one day if developed. Grant Hugs-Flesh out of Oregon State's a pretty fascinating player. This is a physical safety, 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's not necessarily the fastest, although he does have pretty solid explosiveness. This is somebody who can lay the boom, a big, hard-nosed type of kid, and somebody who's very reliable, at least in zone coverage. I don't think he has a ton of versatility, maybe not the guy you put at nickel corner or at sub-linebacker. I think he's really limited to that safety spot, but I do really like what he can do on the back end. And then Ronnie Dayton Quinn from Clemson's pretty fascinating because he's played linebacker for Clemson over the past few seasons. However, only being 5'11", 225 pounds, NFL scouts view him more as a safety going forward, even though he's played linebacker in college. He still has really good athleticism for the safety position, and he is a thick guy. I mean, 225 pounds, very strong, very bulky. This is the type of guy who, again, can absolutely lay the boom. He had a great season this year for Clemson as one of the captains of the defense. Very smart player. Now, it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve going back to safety, so because of that, he's being viewed as a priority free agent, but I think the upside could be very solid. So that'll wrap up the prospect profile. We've now gone through the entire draft class. This is it. These are the players who will be in the class. A couple episodes from now, we will have the draft preview, and then after that, the draft itself, where we're going to kind of go over everyone for the most part. Maybe not everyone, but you get the point. We're going to go through all these positions. We're going to talk about mock drafts, projections, all that fun stuff. Let's go back to the current Titans team now as we look to recap the season and find out what happens in the rest of the postseason. So I think this season was a big success for us. We went 11-6. We won the division. We won a playoff game. And overall, I think a lot of these young guys really progressed. We've seen some of our young players like Scotty Pickens really develop into stars. And we really faced some adversity with Malik Willis getting injured and an undrafted rookie in Garrett Pace coming in and holding the ship. Overall, I think there are some holes on this team, though, that we will look to replace in the offseason. Quarterback is certainly a fascinating position as we start with Malik Willis, who was solid this year. I wouldn't say he was great, but he was pretty good, and I think realistically he'll probably be the starter next year. Of course, Garrett Pace came in with it through the injury. Pace was very good in his first playoff game, and then against the Steelers, obviously, he kind of blew it. But I think Garrett Pace is a very capable backup. On the ground, Derrick Henry, really good. Enough said. We do have to decide what we're going to do with his contract because he is a free agent. I definitely want to get Rocket Reddick more involved next year, and with how good this running back class is, we very well may add one through the draft as well. In terms of receiving, we know Scotty Pickens is a total stud. 85 catches, 1,400 yards, and 10 touchdowns. The only problem is, towards the end of the season, it felt like Scotty Pickens was the only guy we could depend on. Yes, we have other solid receivers like Mecole Hardman, Treylon Burks, and Robert Woods, all three of whom are under contract next year. But at times, it just felt like Scotty was the only guy out there. He was the only guy getting open, the only guy consistently catching the football. So I still view receiver as a need, along with tight end as well. Foster Moreau just isn't all that. The offensive line, I think, for the most part, was fine. It wasn't, I think it was better than it was last year, which is certainly a plus. I do think there's a good shot we end up with a new few starters on the offensive line next year, especially with Taylor Lewan being older and his contract being up. But we do have some young guys who played well. I thought Sekou Bateau, the rookie out of Georgia Tech, was pretty good. And then moving on to defense, again, not great, but solid. Our linebackers were solid. Harold Landry, of course, was incredible. 30 tackles for loss and 14 sacks. Complete game record, and we saw that against the Steelers in the playoff game as he finished with 4 sacks in that matchup. I do want to add some more complimentary pass rushers around him. Not that the pass rush was bad per se. Bud Dupree was solid, particularly early in the year. Fletcher Cox was pretty good. And then in the secondary, a lot of interceptions, but the secondary was really inconsistent. Cardell Simpson really was the only guy I feel like we could trust throughout the year. The only guy not allowing big plays consistently. So I'm very excited about another year of his development. He was great as a rookie. But we've got some decisions with Christian Fulton, whose contract is up. Fulton was great in the playoffs, but very inconsistent in the regular season. McCreary was not great. Caleb Farley even was not great, despite high interception production with 6. And then I thought our safeties were really good. I mean, Kevin Byard's an all-pro. And I thought Juan Thornhill was pretty good. I'm pretty sure he was only on a one-year deal, though, so we're going to have to figure out if we want to bring him back. The special teams, once again, was very good. Randy Bullock is him. He did not miss a field goal again. He did miss 2 extra points against Carolina. I'm not sure why it didn't show on that one screen, but he wasn't exactly perfect. And then Brett Kern was good again, but he is getting older, and we do have a good punter on the practice squad, so this could be the end of Brett Kern. We'll see. Let's take a look at the awards around the league, and I also want to go over some of the top rookies. So Dak Prescott ends up winning the MVP. No Titans on the list, while Mike McCarthy wins the Coach of the Year. Hey, there's Zach Wilson, by the way, in 10th. Anyway, Mike McCarthy wins Coach of the Year. We're not on the list. Joe Mixon wins the AFC Offensive Player of the Year, with King Henry coming in 8th. While in the NFC, it ended up going to Cooper Kupp of the Rams. Jarvis Landry's kind of a weird one. He finished in 7th. The Defensive Player of the Year in the AFC was Khalil Mack. Of course, he passed Harold Landry right at the end, but we got revenge by beating them in the playoffs. And then the Defensive Player of the Year in the NFC was Nick Bosa. Let's look at some of the top rookies now. Scotty Pickens won the AFC Offensive Rookie of the Year, followed by a couple receivers with Bryson Smith and Matt Levine. And then at the NFC, it was quarterback Clyde Williamson of the Lions, with Masaru Lee, the other top draft pick at quarterback, coming in 2nd. Let's take a look at some of these top rookies here. Obviously, Scotty Pickens headlining the list. He was truly fantastic this year for us. But there are some other really good receivers like Bryson Smith with the New England Patriots and Matt Levine with the Cleveland Browns, both of whom also got over 1,000 yards. We saw some good running back play from Charles Wiggins with the Lions and Ronnie DeRugi with the Ravens. Those guys could have bigger roles, with DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins likely being free agents. Of course, Clyde Williamson, the number 1 pick, had a great season for the Lions. He looks like already one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And he already won the Lions a playoff game, something that organization has not done in 30 years. I think Clyde Williamson's play kind of overshadowed the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Masaru Lee, who also was very solid this year for the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe not as good as Clyde, but still very productive. The Defensive Rookie of the Year was Cyrus Okpoka, with 3 Texans in the top 3, and Cardell Simpson coming in 4th. While in the NFC, it was Brad Bellaford of the Seattle Seahawks, with a couple of Buccaneers in the top 3, with Nick Brown and Amir Alston. So we're seeing some teams with 2 to 3 guys at the top of the Defensive Rookie of the Year list, and a lot of first-rounders like Horn, Moore, Hicks, and Jackson and Savage, all kind of low compared to some of these other late-round guys. We've talked about this Texans trio throughout the season. These 3 guys are the only players on the Texans roster with at least superstar development or better. Of course, Thatcher and Okpoko both have superstar X factor. Bellaford on the Seahawks, the 2nd rounder out of Arkansas, had a great season, outperforming their top draft pick on defense, Roman Horn. And then the Bucs had a couple of guys as well. Nick Brown picked in the 2nd round out of Vanderbilt, had a great season at linebacker. And then safety, Amir Alston picked in the 7th round out of Oklahoma State with a very good season, outperforming their 1st round pick in the secondary, Seattle Jackson. Here's a look at the other awards by position. Derrick Henry finishes 4th for best running back. Scotty Pickens finishes 3rd for best receiver. We have nobody for offensive or defensive lines, although we do have Harold Landry 2nd for best linebacker. Caleb Farley and Kevin Byard both make the list for the best DB. And of course, Fat Randy wins the best kicker award, as he should. And then in the NFC, Clyde Williamson finishes in 3rd for best quarterback, with Masaru Lee 1 spot ahead of former Eagle Jalen Hurts. And then here are the other players at the top of those lists. No real surprising names other than Mike Hughes, with Brad Bellaford coming in 2nd. Very cool. Shout out to Bellaford for having a great season with the Seahawks. Let's now go over the rest of the playoffs. It sucks that we are no longer in it, but there are some other fun storylines. Can the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes keep up their great season? Will the 16-1 Cowboys continue to make history? Can Clyde Williamson push the Lions to the NFC Championship? He does. Those other 3 games ended up being really close, with the Chiefs, Cowboys, and Lions all winning by 1 score. So let's see what happens. Which teams are going to make the Super Bowl? We had the Chiefs going up against the Steelers in the AFC Championship, and then Dallas playing the Lions in the NFC Championship. Obviously, you guys know who I'm rooting for. I would love to see my Lions get in. It'd be a really fun story with Clyde Williamson. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. The 2-1 seeds end up winning, so the Chiefs and the Cowboys will be our Super Bowl as both games are decided by 6 points. So the Steelers' run comes to an end. It would have been nice to see them win because, they beat us. And then, unfortunately, the Lions don't advance. But Clyde Williamson has won more playoff games this year than the Lions have over the last 60 years. So it's still a very successful season in Detroit. As we go into the Pro Bowl, we are coaching the Pro Bowl. I think last year I answered the other answer to the question, so I guess we're going to change it up here in the press conference. I think because it's the Pro Bowl, it doesn't really matter much. Let's take a look at the Pro Bowl rosters here. Hey, there's Clyde Williamson getting in the NFC along with Ryan Tannehill. As for us, we have Derrick Henry, Scotty Pickens on offense. Those ended up being our only 2 players on that side of the ball. And then on defense, we had Harold Landry and Kevin Byard along with Randy Bullock, the kicker. So we end up with 5 Pro Bowls. Usually I have a complaint or 2 for our team about the Pro Bowl roster, but this year I think they got it spot on. I think those 5 players deserved it, and I honestly don't think anybody else did. I think they got it 100% right with the 5 players who they picked from our team to ultimately make the Pro Bowl. Sure, you can make arguments for some other guys, Caleb Farley being the name that comes to my head, but I just don't think Farley was consistent enough to ultimately get in. So that brings us to the Super Bowl between the Dallas Cowboys and the Kansas City Chiefs. Both of the 1 seeds, they were the 2 best teams in football this year, so I guess they do deserve to be here. And ultimately, the Dallas Cowboys win the game at 24-22. Very close matchup. As I'm going through the box score, the thing that I noticed with Dallas is that nobody individually played all that well. Who are they supposed to get the Super Bowl MVP to? Maybe Ezekiel Elliott? He had under 4 yards a carry, though, so it's not like he was good, but he scored twice. Dak was efficient. Maybe you give it to him. Nobody stood out in terms of receiving or defense, so I really don't know. They ultimately gave it to Leighton Vander Esch, who finished with 12 tackles and nothing else. He just got a lot of tackles, and apparently that's enough to win Super Bowl MVP when nobody else does all that good, but I guess it was a team effort for Dallas as they get ring number 6. So that's what the full playoff picture looks like here in season number 2 of the series. Congratulations to the Dallas Cowboys for winning the championship. But there's one more thing I want to do before we end today's episode, and it's a fun one. So as you simulate into the Super Bowl week, you're able to find out which players on your roster go up in development trade. And there were a few players on our team who ended up going up, who are quite notable. So on the offensive side of the ball, we only had 1 player, but it is a pretty big one, that being wide receiver Scotty Pickens, who now has superstar X Factor. So that's a pretty big deal. We now have 2 X Factors on the offense with him and Derrick Henry. Let me know what abilities you think that we should give Scotty Pickens. I'm really not an expert in terms of abilities. I really want to give him something that impacts what he can do after the catch because I think that's the strongest area of his game. So why not make it even stronger and even cheesier? First one, 3 being a good example. I think there were some other ones as well. And also let me know what superstar abilities we should do. On defense, we had a number of players go up. Christian Fulton, Caleb Farley, and Harold Landry all now have X Factor. Fulton is the most surprising because he really doesn't deserve it, and just so it looks like I didn't cheat, there you go. I really don't know how he went up. He didn't have a lot of interceptions. He didn't make the Pro Bowl. What did he do? How has he gone up to X Factor? He should still have normal. Last year, if you remember, he had a breakout challenge in the Pro Bowl week, which he completed, and it was funny because he didn't even make the Pro Bowl. He also went up to Superstar last year and then went up to X Factor this year for really no reason at all. Like, at least with Caleb Farley, he had a lot of interceptions, so I get it, and then Harold Landry was just dominant all year, so again, I get it. But with Fulton, I don't really know why, and he's a free agent, so he's probably going to ask for more money now. So that's not, honestly, a good thing that he went up, but I guess we're just going to have to deal with it. So that's going to wrap up the episode. Next time around, we'll be going through free agency, which should be pretty fun. We got some tough decisions in terms of players already on the roster we have to re-sign. And then, of course, time to spend some money. We've got almost $100 million in cap space as of now. That number could go up even more. So it should be pretty fun. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out. Tighten up.